Women have no need or desire to prove their biological relatedness to their children in order to pass down property. We have even less of a need to control anyone else's sexual behavior in order to guarantee that relationship. That is just not our biology, and it's just not our shit. Two of my three children are not my direct biological children, and that is absolutely irrelevant to my mind and to my heart and to my decisions about where my property will pass down. Okay, so commerce has always existed, but only with men connecting the dots, right? Realizing their biological relatedness to the offspring that emerged 10 months later, 40 weeks later, did not all men, but always men, did their desire to hoard food, call it private property, and pass that property only to their children emerge. And with that impetus emerged the seeds of the patriarchy, emerged the codes of the patriarchy, and the conversations and the legislation about abortion and consent that we are still talking about 4,000 years later. Only with that impetus did the fruit of the patriarchy emerge, by which I mean toxic capitalism, toxic institutionalized religion, white supremacy, and probably maybe the most oppressive of them all, the internalized impulse for self repression within women that I would argue is actually the number one most oppressive force on this planet. So, in my email newsletter yesterday, I wrote something about how neurodivergent, gifted, glorious, middle aged fractal goddess women should not be trying to contort themselves into the mold, into the archetype of the super successful white businessman that is held out as the aspiration, right? This very linear, very logical, I'm not sure why I'm making this voice, but very like grown up business bro, very serious archetype. And then I went on, to talk about whatever I was talking about. And in response, a very grown white woman emailed me that it was a shame that I wrote that because I'm such a great writer otherwise. And because she's so tired of the way that white men are being treated. Now, something like maybe 60 to 70% of my clients are white women. But 100% of my clients are the right women. And I mean for the revolution. Because my white women clients, we have these conversations, and so many of them are deeply committed. If they have white male children, they are committed to raising white men in a very different way than has ever been done before. All right. So it's not about that. The idea, however, that this 50 some or 60 something plus grown ass white woman thought that it made more sense to act like she was the airport and announce her departure, to email and try to shame or silence or even engage me, a Black woman out here on Rihanna's internet in 2026, because she doesn't like how white men are being treated, and there's something that she expects for me to do about that, versus trying to get to the essence of what I was saying and find in there some insight for raising a more evolved, more um, spiritually well and whole white man. This shit is so validating for me. It's just validating of the need for what I do and what I teach is actually evidence of the precise sort of patriarchal, fear, patriarchally imposed, cultivated, entranced fear and internalized oppression that has been encoded on the DNA of women since freaking 4,000 years. It's like they chiseled that shit out as the Code of Hammurabi and they chiseled it on women's cells. And what I thought was super fascinating yesterday was that my words about white men in the newsletter weren't actually even critical of white men. Like, what was wild was she was complaining, and meanwhile, white men who also don't necessarily want to be forced into that particular archetype and mold were following and subscribing to the same post, right? So I thought what was really fascinating is that what I said wasn't even actually critical of real white men. It was critical of an archetype as imposed on people for whom it was not made. But just the fact that I was speaking truth in proximity to the powerful concept in her mind, white men, or maybe the fact that I'm just not interested in centering men in my work and on my platform. My work centers neurodivergent, gifted women and teaches them about, empowers them to reclaim who they really are and reject what they really aren't. Or maybe it was the fact that I would dare say such a heretical thing as, you know, espousing the idea that being a logical, linear, neurotypical white man is anything but a number one aspiration. Something in that made her feel so unsafe in her body and so endangered in her nervous system that she felt the need to email me to protect the patriarchy, like an email baby Pam Bondi. Okay, no, this is exactly the parasitic remora that women of the world must begin to see has crawled deep inside their cells. This self-repressive impulse and the fear. I think the fear of the untethered, unprotected void they might be end up in if they actually had the Ovarios to center ourselves. Well, the way we go down this path is it's titration. Okay. It's like recovering from any trauma response. It requires titration. We must titrate to our exposure to free and full self expression. We must gradually build the muscles, the musculature, and the inner infrastructure and some of the outer infrastructure in order to fully and freely and perfectly, meaning completely, self express. You must gradually learn how to speak up more and more and more and more and more. So your nervous system can allow you to do that, allow you to speak up, allow you to say what you need, ask for what you need, write what you're called to write. And for some of y'all, that very first step of the first step to building that muscle is to learn how to allow other women who don't have that repression problem to speak their piece without you feeling a need to intervene on behalf of the patriarchy. Now, at the very beginning, that might feel pretty unsafe to you. At the very beginning of your journey, just reading or listening to me say this might feel a little unsafe to you. And that is good. That's how exposure therapy works. It is especially good when you think of that very famous quote from our beloved Reverend Dr. Audre Lorde, who once said, "Beloved, I know self-expression feels unsafe, but your silence was not keeping you safe anyway." So as I see it, you may as well go ahead and claim your place in the revolution and do what you came here to do.